Hey everybody, I'm supposed to go home after I'm out on this run. And yeah, for everybody who's just listening, I'm just filming with my phone because I'm on the top of a little mountain. And I was supposed to go home to like do the intro, but then I thought it would be nice to maybe like show the ones who are watching at least how beautiful it can be here in Bergen, because like it's winter and it's like super icy, but it's like so beautiful up here. I really love it. But yeah, in today's episode we're going to talk with Sarah Piccini, who is working with the UN World Food Program. So she has been working with the UN a bit, and I thought it would be really interesting to talk with her about like the UN World Food Program, but also like how it is working in the UN. Hey everybody, it's me again. Just right before we jump into the episodes with Sarah, I just wanna apologize because I did a rookie mistake and the memory card got full just after 1.5 minutes into the conversation. So then we have to cut to the audio of the cameras, which is like whack, which is like really not good compared to the beautiful 1.5 first minutes that you can now enjoy. But I hope that it's okay. It's the knowledge and the conversation between me and Sarah, which is the most important one. And I actually know that this have happened one more time. But I think that is the last time that it will ever happen. So I hope you stay with me, and trust me that it will be better. But that this is for the knowledge that Sarah is given. That's why I want to have this conversation. So again, I'm sorry for the bad quality of the audio, which you will hear. But yeah, again, thank you so much for being with me in this journey. And thanks again, Sarah, for doing this with me. And okay, so now here we go. This is the conversation between me and Sarah Piccini. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. This is so nice. I'm very impressed with the setup.
Thank you so much. Okay, so should we just jump straight into it? So since today we're talking about like food security especially, and yeah, we never talked about that before here. So if you can maybe explain a little bit about like what's like the food security like 101, if you would say it like that.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. Food security 101. So yeah, I think this is really interesting because there are a lot of terms that get thrown around like hunger and hidden hunger and food security, nutrition security. Maybe these are all terms you might read in like a UN report or something. And maybe it can be slightly confusing exactly what each one of them means. So like hunger, I think my agency says there's like 828 million people suffering from hunger today. And this is referencing like that physical like feeling of being unwell when you're not consuming enough energy, right? And then food security is very related, but it's slightly different because food security is, it's more of like a status of having consistent, reliable access to safe food, like enough safe food to live a good life, right? And so it's not just about being full today, but maybe you're hungry today or maybe you're full today, but it's about that long-term ability to access food, afford food, and consume it over time. Yeah, so there's like the slight difference. And then maybe there's also, we heard the term like hidden hunger. Yeah. I don't know. I think,
is that is that when you get enough food but it's not nutritious?
Exactly. Yeah. So like that's the micronutrient debate, right? Like so over the past 20 years or so, we've realized more and more that people can't live off of calories alone, and that for good brain development, to maximize your IQ, for good physical well-being, you really need to have that diversity of micronutrients in your diet. So it's kind of like one step up from towards like healthy diets.
That's really interesting. Like because first when I thought about food security and so on, I thought that maybe like in developing countries and so on, that was like mostly where we talk about it. But realizing that I think like actually like even in Norway, like there are many people who don't get like nutritious food in their diet. Like we have the possibility, but not everybody has the possibility maybe, because like healthy food can also be more expensive, or is that like a thing around that? Or
yeah, I think you're hitting it on the head for a lot of populations. So there are some places in the world where people are food insecure because they can't access food. So if there's a war, a conflict, if there's a climate shock, or some sort of big avalanche or flood, like in Pakistan, people are food insecure because they literally can't access it. But for most people, it's around affordability. Food security becomes an issue of poverty. Like if you went to a neighborhood, like a food insecure neighborhood in Yemen, for example, you would eat just fine. You would probably eat well, right? Because it would be a question of who has the money to afford a good diet. And then it's also, again, that it's really important, that idea of food security over time, because you can eat well today, but then if you don't eat well tomorrow, it still has that long-term negative impact, especially for kids. So we pay a lot of attention in food security to children under 5, because this is like a critical period where you're determining kind of your future growth status, and if you'll be able to like maximize on your physical and mental growth.
Wow. And how do you work with that? So,
so at the World Food Program, we're the largest humanitarian agency in the world. This is what we say, and it's true.
Yeah.
And we work in 80 countries across the world, I think, in different kinds of contexts. So yes, in emergency contexts where there's conflict, and when there's like a big shock. But also, like, these years have been really tough for like macro shocks, right? Like COVID-19 and this global supply chain food price crisis that's been happening this year, that has really increased the price of food for a lot of food importing countries. So a lot of countries in the Middle East, a lot of countries in Africa that really relied on food from Ukraine or from the neighboring region. And so we respond to that either with direct transfers, so giving food. More than giving food, we often give cash. So I think we're like 60% cash transfers. Yeah, which is something that really aligns to the EA movement. We do cash transfers either directly from us, but more often we try to do it through government systems. So this is the same as in Germany or Norway, or where like families entitled to a certain transfer every month if they need, right? So we try to do like complement government social protection systems when needed. And then we do a lot of programming that kind of bridges the humanitarian and development. So like working with smallholder farmers, working on making food more affordable, accessible, working with retailers, working on food fortification. Also trying to get those micronutrients in
exactly. Huh. And can I ask, like, how did you end up working with this?
So I've always been interested in food policy. And I was in undergrad, I did an internship working with smallholder farmers in Ecuador. We were trying to get them certified organic, and so that they could sell local market or outside the local market and earn more premium for their product. And I also learned then like how complicated that system was, and also how maybe like part of it I remember was trying to talk about child labor on some of these farms, and why like the 10-year-old should be in school rather than helping.
Wow, yeah.
And farmers being like, no, I've been working on the farm since I was like 6. Like he can work on the farm too. Things like this. So yeah, I think I got an early peek into some of the issues around like food and agriculture, and I was very interested from that point on. So I've had a couple of different roles, but now I've been at the World Food Program for 5 years.
Wow. And how is it like working like within like United Nations or Yeah,
it's good. I like it. I don't like it every day, obviously, but overall I like it. I think you take every job with its good and its bad. And maybe, like the critiques of the UN are that it's quite slow and it's very bureaucratic. I think those are true. But I also think that it can be quite impactful. You work with a lot of decision makers all the time. You work with a lot of different partners who are, working across the globe. And even small tweaks like what food to put in a food basket ends up really mattering to, thousands of families. So it's in that way, it's really interesting. And so we're at an effective altruism weekend, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I really appreciate about this weekend and these conversations is that it's asking like, what is the best thing you can do with what you have? And I feel like a lot of our work is trying to figure out what is like a good and feasible thing that we can do, which is already quite an achievement often. But so I think there's a lot of opportunity to explore like what's the best thing that you can do with like a UN agency or with some of these partnership roles.
And like how do you like maybe somebody like who listens or use this like wanna work in the UN maybe, like do you have any like I don't know, like tips or advice, like how do you get into like working in the UN?
That's hard because the UN is such a big entity. So I think there are like, I'm going to mess up this number, but I think there are like 16 different agencies and they all have their own areas of focus. So whether it's peace and security or like issues of nuclear conventions or like UNICEF, like children, the World Food Program. And I think you can find an area that you're passionate about. And then there would be different entry points. You have to decide if you want to be more on the global policy level or if you'd be interested in joining one of the UN country offices in a country and working on like the tangible projects that are delivered on the ground in that chosen area of work.
Thanks.
You can tell me if it doesn't make sense and then we'll repeat.
No, that was good. Okay, I'm just trying to think more about like maybe like within the UN World Food Program, like because like now as you mentioned a little bit, like there like when there's like war happening and like we see what's happening in like Ukraine and so on, is that an example of like then you will go in and help directly or like I think you mentioned something on the way here that like you also work directly. You have teams that do that or? So each agency is structured differently, but ours is structured so that most of our focus is country-based. So we have country offices in 80 countries, something like this, who are focused on supporting governments in their goals around food security and nutrition, and then also doing direct programming. So whether that's helping directly get food to schools for like school meal programs, or getting cash to people through cash transfers on their mobile phones, or working with like one of the things we do is around fortified food. So we try to work with local millers and private companies to increase access to fortified wheat or rice or oil, so that the food that comes in our baskets or in the schools or even just available to the local community also has that added benefit of the micronutrient intake. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Are there any other points like around like food security or like policy that we should dig a little deeper into maybe?
Yeah, so we were saying the reasons that people are food insecure are many different reasons, right? It can be questions of poverty, it can be questions of being part of a minority group that has less social status, and I think I was saying that women experience food insecurity at higher rates than men, because like maybe in some cultures men would be prioritized for better foods than the rest of the family. And so it's really I think if you were really trying to tackle issues of food security, you'd have to like dig deeper into some of these underlying causes, right? Giving people food and giving people cash is really helpful and will help them get to the next day and meet their immediate needs, but it won't solve the structural problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think in the beginning you were referring to food security issues in Europe and in America, right? And this is why, like, I think in America 1 in 8 kids is food insecure.
Wow.
And obviously it's not an issue of not being enough food around. There's plenty of food.
Yeah, true.
It's these other issues.
Yeah. Okay, but what about the ones not in like America and Europe? Like, what are some of the like underlying causes? Because when I'm thinking about like food security and like hunger and so on, it's mostly people who are like hungry, and not the ones in Europe and America. Even though of course that's super important as well. But yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think what you'll find is there are like very context-specific reasons, right? So my portfolio is mostly East Africa and a couple of countries in Southeast Asia that I tend to work with more often. And there we focus a lot on still issues of poverty. So cash transfers to help meet basic needs so that families aren't choosing between feeding their families and then making investments maybe into productive assets or putting their kids in school, like trying to really get to the point where you're not making those trade-offs and allow you to get, access to whatever it is you need to help your well-being. I think what I want to say about working in developing countries is that the underlying causes of food insecurity are often, they're multiple. They're economic factors, there's social factors, there are cultural factors, and that the two kind of big actors who can make a real difference are the government and the private sector. So that's everyone from like the big companies in a country to the small mom and pop shops. In many of these countries, most employment is informal. And really, I think it's about creating partnerships with those different actors to tackle those underlying problems so that they're more sustainable solutions. In development, there's a new trend called localization. Have you heard this? It's like the new buzzword of the season.
Oh, no.
But it's a new word for an old idea that basically the solutions to problems in India should come from Indians and people who are in India.
Oh, yeah.
The solutions to problems in Tanzania should come from Tanzanians and people who are working on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that supporting the governments in these countries and the people who are working on the ground is really important to identify those structural challenges and what some solutions might be.
How do we do that? Or like, can we support them in doing that? Or is it then not localization again?
Yeah, I think you can support them because I think there are like many different resources that are helpful. So like obviously financial resources, but also just knowledge and sharing best practices and then letting people in those countries take what they want and can from those and applying them as appropriate to those countries.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, since we can give like a lot of knowledge and like fund their project or whatever, but like it's in the end it's them who are like, okay, we want to do this, so like let's go. Yeah, so we're not coming in there like being the saviors or like helping out.
Yeah, I think I think that balance is really tricky because sometimes they'll tell you, oh, what we need is like some like human resources, like a person to manage this project. And maybe that's true, like there's a gap in the short term, but in the long run, exactly what you're saying. You want people in that country to be able to take those resources and run with it.
Interesting. And is this, if I remember correctly, I think it's a growing number of people who are like food insecure. Is that true? Or how is is it getting better, worse, or?
Yeah, maybe
Up
this
and
is where
down.
we should have started our conversation. So you are wearing an SDG pin right now with the Sustainable Development Goals. And as you know, SDG 2 is zero hunger. So in 2015, the world set this very ambitious target to get to zero hunger by 2030. And unfortunately, over the past few years, we've actually been moving away from that goal.
Yeah.
Right now, they estimate that if things continue as they are, there will still be like 650 million hungry people by 2030.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And that's for many reasons, not least among them being COVID and these like recent supply chain and price crises. COVID especially, I think, was really hard for many developing countries because it has led to a bit of a fiscal, bit of a debt problem now. So I don't know if you've been following what's happening in Sri Lanka, but the government was unable to pay many of their debts. And the World Bank has estimated that between 30 and 40 other countries will be in a similar position in the coming year or two where they're unable to pay their debts because of how much COVID cost them.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have not. But I did hear one thing maybe, so that kind of makes sense. But again, correct me if I'm wrong or if you know about this, but that the government in Sri Lanka said something about that people have to grow their own food for like 1 day a week or something.
I don't know about that one, but it doesn't surprise me, I guess, because I think the situation was so bad, and that's why you saw people protesting, right? And you saw a change in government and a change in the president, prime minister. I mean, the situation there is also unique because they're an island and they import everything, right? So if they don't have the foreign reserves to be able to pay for imports, things kind of just stop.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But I think they've reached a deal with the IMF. I'm pretty sure I read that. We can double check.
Yeah, we can double check and put the links in the description so people can see if they want. Yeah. Cool. Or not cool, or like,
But interesting,
interesting,
right?
Yeah, very interesting. Oh, but can you touch on more on that maybe? Like, okay, there are like two things I want to know a little bit more about, I think. Like, one is regarding like the SDGs and like how that's been going, or like if you have some more like almost inside information, or like just since you're working with it, like is that like do you work with those goals and with what do you call that in English? Like not the main goal, but the other small goals under.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
like the sub targets.
Yeah. Like how well is that connected?
Yeah, so I mean the SDGs are so they followed the Millennium Development Goals, right? And that was from 2000 to 2015. And if I remember correctly, there were 10 goals, and it was really successful. It was around, like children in school, halving poverty. And I think the world kind of showed what it could achieve when it had more focus around certain goals. And so then in 2015, you got these 17 goals. And you have not only UN agencies working towards these goals, but private companies are working towards these goals, governments and different research institutions and civil society. So I don't know that many people work on all of them. Like for us, we have two. Yeah. So we do SDG 2 and 17. 17 is really around partnerships. And you got it. And under SDG 2, so it's called Zero Hunger, but inside it, there is a lot of stuff around nutrition, working with small farmers, increasing local production of nutritious foods. And those are all things that we track and try to push as well.
Are there some of those goals which are actually going good? Do you know?
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I mean, these are also complicated. It's hard to say why, but like if you look at the overall trends, like poverty is like globally going down, right? Like the world is becoming a better place overall. I do think there are some that are a bit worrying, like every year, every other year, the Gates Foundation publishes what they call the goalkeepers report, like SDG goalkeepers.
Oh yeah.
And so I was looking at the one for this year, and Melinda French Gates wrote in her essay, like the ones on women's equality are really not doing as well as we would hope. And that at this rate, like we won't get gender parity until like 2100 or something like that. So there are some that are like progressing and then some that are really stagnating still and need more attention.
Okay, like this is almost a little bit embarrassing, but and maybe a part of the problem. But that word used, what was that? Gender parity?
Gender equity, maybe? I don't actually remember what word I used. I think
if that's what you, then I know. Okay, cool. Let's hope.
But there are a lot of terms there. There's equity, there's empowerment, there's all of these, and they all mean slightly different things.
Yeah, true. Like especially like when talking to people about stuff I don't know much about, and I feel I'm always asking like, what do you mean? Like,
oh, that's good. Yeah, that's what we want. And
I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, I ask a lot of questions. I'm pretty sure people think we're very dumb. But
that's how we learn. So oh, that's amazing. Okay, cool. And then the other thing I was thinking more about in depth, like you said. Yeah, in depth, actually about depth, or depth with a D.
Yeah.
Do you have some more like information around that, like about what happened in Sri Lanka or like in other countries you mentioned as well, like that maybe that will happen in other countries, and how will that affect the world, or
how that'll affect the world, I think, is the big question for like the economists. At a high level, what they're saying is that because of COVID and because so many governments both lost a lot of revenue during the COVID period, but also had to pay more to their citizens and to their local economies to keep them afloat, a lot of these governments took on debt that they couldn't service. Over the long term. And again, I forget the exact number, but there's somewhere between 30 and 40 countries at risk around the world. And one of the things that we're seeing, which I think is really good, is at first there was kind of, people knew that this was a problem, but no one really wanted to talk about it much because it's a complicated thing, right? Like you're talking about sovereignty issues, but you're also talking about these like international systems of debt and repayments, and no one wants to not be paid back. Right?
True.
But with the crisis in Ukraine, many governments, including the G7, led by Germany,
what's the G7?
The 7 richest economies.
Cool.
Yeah, they form like there's like the G7, there's the G77, there's so they met this year. Also, like the United States had an initiative. The French have an initiative called Farm, and these are all multi-pronged plans to deal with the crisis in Ukraine in terms of its impact on the rest of the world. So maybe you heard that there were worries that wheat exports would not make it to the countries that needed it, that fertilizer exports were not making it to the countries that needed. And also that there was this debt problem. So through these different plans, they're trying to address some of these issues by supporting governments and budgets, and by creating alternatives. I think it's a big challenge and a slow process, but like I think there's a movement to address the debt crisis this way. Also, the World Bank is leading a few initiatives there with like an IFI roadmap.
Oh, it's so good to know that there are like multiple entities are like coming together to like try to solve this and like sense make like how can we actually make this better.
Slowly, like these processes take time because there are like a lot of negotiations and one could even say there's like too many initiatives happening with everyone leading their own, but hopefully like there are a lot of calls for coordination, and while nobody wants to be coordinated, hopefully they do come together.
Hope so. Interesting. I have this one question which I think is kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's just like if there was one documentary to be made within like the topic,
Oh,
yeah, what should it
cold question too. I was not warned about this.
be? No, yeah.
One documentary to be made. You know, my work these past couple of months has been around the issues of food and climate. So, like, I'll head to COP 27 next week, and these are all like very complicated issues, right? Like climate change and food security and agriculture systems and stuff. But I think there's so many linkages between the two. Also because agriculture and food sectors contribute like 1/3 of climate emissions. But not only, right? Like we don't understand maybe like all of the different ways that we could work towards mitigation and adaptation in our food, both in how we produce it, but also the foods we choose to eat, and how that could impact climate change. And I think that that's worth exploring more. There are some good books around, but I think it's an area that we don't understand very well yet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then do you have some, like for people who want to learn more about like this topic, like, do you have some books or some documentaries or maybe just like the website of UN World Food Program?
Yeah, you can check out the World Food Program. We even have, I learned we have a TikTok now.
Wow.
The World Food Program.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah. So you can go on TikTok.
Cool.
And,
I'm going to check that out. Yeah. We'll link that below.
Yeah.
For people to see.
I think there are a few good books. My favorite is from school and it's escaping me now, but I'll send you the link after.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, these are big issues, and you might be interested in, like, anyone listening might be interested in different parts of it, right? Like, some people might be really interested in agriculture or in fish farming. Other people might be really interested in, like, food safety, because maybe that's an area that doesn't get as much attention. It's not as sexy, right? But, like, what happens if the food goes bad before people can eat it? And it's wasted or it makes people sick. And I think food safety causes, like a significant penalty to like economic growth every year. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any last thoughts?
No, I think this was great. I appreciate you inviting me to chat. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more about your journey in effective altruism. And
thank you.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch.
We will. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again, Sarah, and to everybody watching and listening. Thank you too. Hope that you're having a nice day. And if you have any feedback for the podcast, please let me know. And hope to see you in the next episode. Okay, bye-bye.